before we begin the first session with our journals, I'm going to hand over to Abhishek to quickly set the context for why Future Marathon, why today. Over to you, Abhishek.
No, thank you so much, Parul. From our own particular industry perspective, there's a huge change in the way we are planning our comms. Clients are forever asking us on how we could include tools like data, behavioral science, to plan future comms, and how do we look at our content and publishing strategies moving beyond just traditional channels that we used in the past to new ways of communication. We are today talking about artificial intelligence and blockchain technologies to bring in how we could use comms. There's this phenomenal amount of work that's happening in the virtual AI space that comms will take over in the near future. Now, keeping that in mind, there are some ground level trends that are emerging, and there are trends that are going to be completely changing us as we move forward. There are certain sectors that continue to be very, very critical. Healthcare will continue to be, or is being perceived to be, very, very important as we move along. And clearly, technology will play a very, very integral role in bringing that forth. So keeping that in mind, we decided that we should bring the best minds across sectors to talk to us about what possibly were the learnings from maybe 2020 when the pandemic started to 2021. And now that we're getting into 2022, fingers crossed that COVID will give a relief with the new trends that are coming in. How do we see that emerging, and are there going to be any similarities, or the world will continue to change at the rapid pace that it is evolving and changing? That's the context to the conversation today, and we are very excited about hosting this. And it's been a great journey with Parul now over 7 months, and you'll continue to see a lot more happening in this space. So over to you, Parul.
Thank you, Abhishek. And it's really been a wonderful journey. Look forward to more associations in 2022. Just a bit of admin and housekeeping. Please, those of you who are not speakers, I request you to turn your mute yourself. It's a bit disturbing. And those of you whose computers alerts are clinking away, please silent them also. We are also live on YouTube now. I've put the link in the chat box. Please feel free to share with your friends and colleagues. So here we go. Welcome to the first session, the Journo Speak session 1. I'd like to introduce Suresh Seshadri, business editor of The Hindu, also a former colleague of mine from TV18 days. And when we used to go down to the TV18 office, Suresh was one of the few print journalists who was friendly with us TV guys. So a long association. Welcome, Suresh. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Thanks, Parul. Appreciate having me.
Next, we have Pooja Talwar. I think all of you are extremely familiar with Pooja. You must have seen her always in the company of the bold and the beautiful. And welcome, Pooja. I've known Pooja, I think, literally all my life since school. So it's really good to, and we've been former colleagues on TV18 as well. And she is a very, very senior, proper entertainment journalist, the way entertainment journalism should be done, and not your pink villa clickbait stories. And she's, of course, the former entertainment editor of NDTV and now an influencer in her own right. Welcome, Pooja.
Thank you so much, Parul. Thank you for having me here.
Welcome. And for those of you who want a bit of Bollywood magic, she was just interviewing Akshay Kumar and she's come straight from that interview. So, I'm feeling more with it just by association. So welcome. And last but certainly not the least, we have a brand specialist, Mukta Lad, who is the assistant editor with Brand Equity. I think all of you are very familiar, would like to be very much featured in Brand Equity, Economic Times. I think it's a major client task for all our PR folks who are logged in. Welcome, Mukta.
Thank you so much.
So off we go. So my first question is to Suresh. I know you said that crystal gazing is not something which you're too keen on, but going by how 2021 has gone, what do you think are the issues which will continue to be important for the economy and business in 2022, considering how 21 is gone, the way the economy has been going, the latest Omicron crisis, the way the markets have been reacting to that? What would be your pick on what issues will matter in 2022?
So, well, I mean, one of the biggest challenges for the economy, not just for India, for the world is going to be. How interconnected do we want to remain, or how insular are we going to get? Because clearly post-COVID and now again Omicron and the reaction in different parts of the world from governments, we are seeing that the first reaction, almost knee-jerk and instantaneously, seems to be, let's shut our borders. And while one understands where this comes from, being very reflexive in reactions has its own costs. So going forward, I think the need for policymakers and for public opinion to drive, should I say, views into, you all have a big role, the PR industry and the communications industry, in getting to policymakers information and views which are germane and relevant. And this is not just mass, sort of public opinion, but also targeted scientific opinion, which from the experts, which gives policymakers inputs on, what are we doing right or wrong about how we respond to these kind of situations. Now, Omicron is a variant which is right now in the news, but rest assured, I'm quite certain that we're going to have more variants coming along, because the biggest problem at this moment is the fact that the vaccination rollout in some parts of the world has been exceedingly good. In some parts of the world where it has been numerically high and percentages are high, there are still large and deep pockets of the unvaccinated. And which is why you're seeing, for instance, in a country like the US and parts of Europe, right now, waves of more infections and fatalities of also fairly high orders of magnitude. Now, as someone said, I think it was probably the WHO director or someone else who said that till the last person is vaccinated and till the last person is protected, none of us are safe. And that's not just being said for the sake of a sort of a moral kind of view. I think fundamentally, the nature of any virus, it's just got simple RNA. Viruses, by their simplicity, are actually the most lethal because they quickly mutate just little piece of this thing, and that's it. So they are. So anyway, what I wanted to say was the biggest challenge is going to be, and WTO talks are also going to be happening. Do we want a more connected, integrated world? And if we do, then we're going to have to cope with quick transmission of a virus. Now, probably Omicron's detection in South Africa happened on X date, but probably the virus had already flown across multiple borders. I mean, that particular variant. So, and when we say travel, it's not just human travel, but also travel of the supply chain bottlenecks, which are being seen across multiple industries. Automobile, for instance, right now is the worst hit because of a semiconductor issue. Multiple industries are facing problems, and it's to do with the fact that supply chains are seriously in deep crisis or very deeply sort of affected. So if the world decides that we want to get more insular, it's going to come with significant economic costs. The world decides let's try and stay more interconnected, then again, it comes with costs, but it also has benefits. But you need to lay down the parameters and the paradigms on how you want to stay well connected. And it is in this context that right now, as we are about to end 2021, we are faced with serious geopolitical crisis flashpoints. It's not just Ukraine and Russia, which to us sitting here is like, what does it matter to us if Ukraine and Russia have a conflict? They can go to hell. Sorry. Russian gas is set to pass to Europe through Ukraine, and Ukraine is at the front line of, part of Western Europe. So Eastern Europe, sorry, but the part of Europe which is significantly, should I say, connected with the rest of the world in terms of trade and commerce. So whatever happens out there impacts all of us from the economic standpoint, and so that is one theater. The China-Taiwan standoff, and is Xi likely to move on Taiwan? And if a conflict comes up there, God forbid, I mean, we are facing a fairly serious situation. So the entire, Pacific and South China Sea, again, that sort of throws everything out of kilter. We in India ourselves have had this border conflict with China, which hasn't got resolved. And why am I, as a business editor, talking about something which is in the realm of strategy and politics and defense and so on? Well, all of these things impact the economy. And, the fundamental fact is in 2022, I think some of these conflicts, unless they are quickly resolved, there is statesmanship, of which there is a great paucity across the world. I don't see anyone who's willing to stand up and say, let me be a statesman and say, it doesn't matter if my country ends up losing in the bargain, but I'm going to try and, offer a deal to the other guy on the other side, whether it's the trade standoff between the US and China. The US or China says, you know what, let's put this aside. The US has just raised the ante by, this diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Olympics, which may not really impact much from the event itself, but what it does is it sends a message to China that, listen, we want to, get into the boxing ring and spar. So China's in turn going to say, okay, I can also spar. And then this is just, taking the world down a rabbit hole. So I think, and then coming to India itself, I think the challenges are, the same interconnectedness aspect. Our services sector, IT is like one of our areas which has done reasonably well. Exports seem to have done well, but part of the export story is also the fact that the prices of everything have gone up. Inflation is high and it's going to continue to remain high in India. How does the central bank just yesterday or 2 days ago, announce their policy where they've sat quiet and said, we're not going to raise rates for now, but the challenge is going to be by the time they actually have to act in, say, January or February, is it going to be too late? Are they going to be faced with a situation where inflation is also increased and the economy isn't gaining traction because of whether it's because of Omicron or whether it's because of other reasons then? So the other reasons why the economy is still not getting the sort of, should I say, tailwinds that, or not tailwinds, the sort of buoyancy that one would like to see, is the fact that private consumption expenditure is still not happening. The RBI's consumer confidence survey seems to show that households are willing to spend on essentials, not so much on non-essentials. So white goods and, durables and laptops and iPhones and what have you are not going to be consumed in a hurry. Consumptive capacity of our society is also seriously constrained because we aren't creating enough jobs, and a lot of jobs were lost over 2020 and 21. Hasn't sort of set right the job creation part of it. Some of it is probably happening. Incomes were impacted. So again, some companies are beginning to reinstate those cutbacks, but is it happening quickly enough? I'm not sure. So multiple challenges as we go ahead into 2022. The geopolitical one, the one to do with how the world approaches in the backdrop of the pandemic and future variants. How does it approach from a standpoint of its should I say tactical or strategic approach? Do they want to become more insular or more integrated? And of course, in India, the issues of inflation and growth not yet gaining traction at this point in time.
Thank you so much. I think that's a wonderful overview of what we've been discussing. And my takeaways from you is that, the world may be flat is a nice slogan, but it's something, how exactly it's flat is what 2022 will grapple with it. Statesmanship at a global level is required. And when they are personal in the sense, when they're national priorities, how does that work? Thirdly, the supply chains are impacted, and a running story in the New York Times has been the shortage of cream cheese in New York, and which is a direct. Pooja smiling. Those of you who like your cream cheese and bagels, I mean, this is how what Suresh is saying. It impacts you directly. It's in your kitchen and in your home. So thank you for that, Suresh. I'm going to go over to Pooja and then to Mukta. Pooja, bringing you in on the same general question, but for entertainment and OTT this time, what do you think is the big entertainment trend? Is the big budget film only now for the cinema halls?
Parul, interesting that you asked me this question. I just asked the same question to the movie creators I was just interviewing a short time ago, because a lot of them, as you've seen, theaters have just opened up and also have chosen to release their films on the OTT platform. So I was asking them, how is it going to work? And they said they're waiting till January because as of now, the occupancy is just 50%. But what was interesting was earlier, these movies made their money from selling the satellite rights. Now, what they're doing is they're selling the satellite rights. They're also selling the film after a certain period of time to the OTT platform. So the box office returns in the theater now become their profit. So like today we are speaking, there's a small budget film like Chandigarh Kare Aashiki that's released. Akshay Kumar's next one called Atrangi Re with Sara Ali Khan has gone for a digital release, which they said they had already discussed even before the theaters opened. His Suryavanshi has just opened on screens, but is now going to come onto a streaming platform. So they're going to coexist because no one can take away the magic of cinema at all. But yes, for OTT, not only for Bollywood, but OTT has been a new lease of life for regional cinema, if I would say, and also for content creators and new talent that earlier would never make it to films have found their uh, flat playground at the OTT. So you have now OTT stars. Now this guy called Pratik Gandhi is the best example of it. After Scam 1992, this unknown actor is being quoted by everyone in Bollywood. On the other hand, if you see the Korean Squid Game had this Indian for just precisely 2 minutes from 3,000 subscribers, he's sitting at 7 million subscribers today. So OTT is now creating a kind of stardom. Will it upend Bollywood and its stardom? I don't think that's happening. But if you see the traffic, now Bollywood is choosing to be on OTT. Ravina Tandon has just made her digital debut. Saif Ali Khan has been doing it for a while. And little by little, all of them are going to test waters here. Sushmita Sen has got a new lease of life with OTT. Also, another thing to see here is the second tier and the third tier cities. They are now catering to that. If you see whether it's like a panchayat and the kind of quota factory, they're not catering to Mumbai, Delhi. They're not catering to us. They're actually catering to people in Jharkhand. You had that Jamatra on fishing. They're catering to people in Ranchi. So it's OTT is big. TV, we always said, when TV came, radio is dead. And now OTTs come, TV is dead. None of that happening. But now it's also alerted content creators because no one is going to settle for mediocre stuff now. And also, on the other hand, if you do see the overheads of cinema are a lot because they have been shut for a while, they've undergone losses. Now, an audience like you and me is actually going to think twice. Do I need to spend those $500 watching a movie at director's cut, or do I wait for a few months and watch it in the comfort of my home? You have that option now. So this is something. So at the moment, there's a lot of tussle between multiplex owners and OTT platforms saying that we'll only put the film on your platform after a certain time. But for indie filmmakers, independent producers, Amazon, Netflix have opened their doors. Send us your script. We will finance your movie. A lot of money is being put into OTT. And if you see, the new shows that are coming are nothing less than, big budget films. Also the formats, you have mini formats now. You have 8-episode shows. You have a show that's finished in 6 episodes. So, and also new talent, new story, and also stories. If you see, a lot of films are actually constrained by the kind of stories you can put across. OTT, it works. You can put across a lot more that you can put on, say, cinema. So that way, it's OTT has actually, I think, shaken up Bollywood out of their complacency and also given a new lease of life to producers, talents, and especially regional cinema. Malayalam cinema was always there and was brilliant. But hey, guess what? We discovered it thanks to OTT. I was just amazed because people like us went to the film festivals and watched Malayalam movies. But however, Malayalam films did not get the required theaters and screens in, say, the metropolis like Bombay or Delhi. But now everybody is talking about Fahad Fazil. Everybody is a huge fan of Fahad Fazil. So that's how OTT has, I don't want to say regional cinema, pan-Indian cinema, because also made people realize that Bollywood, guess what, is not the national cinema of our country. That's how OTT has helped. It's kind of also shaken Bollywood out of its complacency. Stars like OTT, because they have a bigger reach now. Because now I just interviewed Sara Ali Khan. She says, I'm grateful that people on Disney will watch me across 190 countries, then being just restricted to those 90 screens in India. So it's kind of helped. OTT is big. Bollywood needs to, as Abhay Deol says, it's the genre. And they now have facing competition. Also, people are exposed to world cinema. We are seeing Korean cinema. I've been watching it for 7 years, but the wave. And now suddenly, oh God, their content is far more superior. So is your content. It's just, you can do a lot more. You can experiment with stories. So that's what's happened with OTT. Cinemas will stay, and it's great profits, as somebody from one of the big studios told me. Box office is just profit. They have made up for their costs with selling the rights to satellite and to OTT platforms. So OTT is here. And if you see every day, there is one app. Amazon has mini series, which you can only watch on Amazon app, and they're investing that much in it. I mean, every day there is a new app, there is a new platform, and they're all commissioning programs, putting in the monies. The sky is the limit, honestly.
I think that's absolutely wonderful. And one thing I noticed while watching the latest season of Inside Edge is the amount of branding they did with JBL. I mean, it was like in your face, and that kind of branding you only saw in movies earlier. You know that.
And also like the Korean. Sorry, I'm interrupting. If you see, every drama is sold out. You have a Subway, you have a Domino's, you have the makeup brands, and that's exactly what OTT is now doing. You'll suddenly have maybe Pizza Hut, you'll suddenly have Vivo, you'll suddenly have someone. So that's what, as you said about JBL, that's great branding and promotions. And you've recovered your costs.
That's really true. Thank you so much, Pooja. I'll be coming back to you for more on the Squid Game. I think something which will interest us all. Now over to Mukta. Mukta, you're a person. I think journalists, kind of perhaps envy and also feel sorry for, because you would be the target of all the pitches, the endless pitches of everybody who wants to be on their client to be on brand equity. So, what do you think are, in a global way, what are the brand trends going ahead? What's happening with brands? You're on mute.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry about that. So honestly, we're hit by the wedding season right now. There was the festive season that we just saw, and now we're in the wedding season. And I honestly feel that COVID season is going to come back, unfortunately, because for two reasons. One is that we're now used to getting out more as a consumer. After sitting at home for like a year almost, and now we've tasted that freedom again. It's going to be very difficult for us to again go back, because we've now suffered one lockdown and we feel like we can't go back to that phase, right? So I think when it comes to COVID trends, it's going to be brands issuing sort of more advisory kind of communication, addressing maybe vaccine hesitancy, because we're still a little lagging on that front. As Suresh also mentioned, it's a global problem, but we also need to get our bearings on that front. So I think COVID advertising is sort of going to come back with brands sort of issuing wash your hands and stay home, and trying to also make it known how it is. I also feel actually that brands are this time better equipped when it comes to how to communicate and how to, they won't grapple as much as they did, because COVID was such a sudden thing, right? I mean, we just almost shut down overnight. So I feel that that is going to happen. That is sort of like the trend number one in the near future, as I see, that the uncertainty is something that is going to just keep this sort of communication alive for the time to come. Because like Suresh said, that, this virus is not going to go so easily without mutating and mutating. And so each time we are a bit complacent, it's just going to come back. It's like that meme that somebody put out, right? Like the virus is like a New Year resolution now. It's like New Year, new me. So it's just going to keep happening. As far as other trends are concerned, what we've been seeing is, the focus on purpose-driven communication. Brands are suddenly, not suddenly, but there are a lot of exercises that are happening, especially with key FMCG or all kinds of brands actually, where they're focusing on more on, the entire global purpose exercises that are being rolled out, etc. And I think the communication will focus on that as well. Brands convincing consumers that they are sustainable, that they are doing good and they're giving back, and which was earlier completely sidelined to say one sort of a CSR activity. I think purpose is going to be something that is more at the forefront. Another interesting thing that I think that will happen in this space is that brands, newer brands that are coming up, which have, say, purpose, and the purpose has sustainability and doing good weaved into their entire brand values, and brand values and their entire existence, and as a result, they're also their profit and their revenue models. These are the brands that will actually do very well. So if you take a homegrown brand that has sustainability, for instance, weaved into its resin, so to speak, will be taking on, say, a P&G or an HUL. It'll be when it comes to purpose, it'll be easier for them because these key giant FMCG brands weren't born with purpose at their core. So with the woke millennial sort of customer who's questioning everything, where is this coming from? Where is this being sourced from? What is the material that is being used? What is your supply chain like? How are you paying your workers? So I think brands that have this hardwired into their DNA will be doing better in the coming years. It'll take some time, but I think the focus will be there. If I may, I also feel that brands will have to definitely be more cognizant when it comes to how they represent all sections of society, everything, body types and LGBTQIA. It just will not help being tone deaf anymore, because as the world becomes more politically correct, it also will become more and more work, more and more questions will be raised. Social media is becoming more widespread, and they just will have to not be tone deaf anymore. Every communication needs to be properly scrutinized. And I think that might happen. Will it be overly sanitized? Perhaps. But I think that they cannot be tone deaf anymore. Another thing that I think will happen is AI, as Abhishek said when he was just introducing us. AI will play a major part right now. I feel that more than in anything that is consumer facing, AI more or less happens in the digital business transformation stage, where brands are sort of overhauling their own infrastructure. It's still nascent when it comes to solving consumer problems. Like, just look at chatbots. They're like 3 or 4 years old as a technology, but very rarely are chatbots helping any consumers solve any queries. But unfortunately, brands are sort of depending on their chatbots to help people without really ironing out any of the issues. We've all faced these problems where we're trying to say change an airline ticket, and the chatbot is just taking us around in circles, right? And nothing really is happening, but there is no human being that you can speak to. So these are the kind of things that need to be ironed out in the AI space. But I think it will get a huge sort of boost now with this whole metaverse speak, which is happening, and brands embracing it as well. So globally, it's happening. It won't take time before India also starts jumping the gun, and marketers are prone to this sort of thing. Like, what is that? Let's do that. So there's going to be a lot of AI talk coming for sure. And for my fifth thing, I want to just say that it's cryptocurrency. We are not going to hear the end of it. It's going to be everywhere. It's a very interesting space. There's something new happening there all the time, almost every day. And so with things changing and more brands trying to get in to the space, and brands will go where millennials go, right? So millennials are getting more and more interested. India is the number one taker for cryptocurrency. And I think communication in that space also will be really interesting to watch out for. Right now, most of it is on hold because of the regulations, etc. But once they get their bearings and there's more clarity on that front, I think cryptocurrency is a great space to watch out for. So more or less, those are my trends that we've noticed are going to be quite important and interesting in 2022.
I'll come back to you for a question on that, but brands which have sustainability baked into the revenue model are the brands to watch out for. While we are on it, please, all of you in the audience, you're welcome to ask questions. Please start putting your questions down in the chat box. And if you have comments on what are the trends which you see, please put them down in the chat box as well. A final round of questions for our speakers before we move on to questions from the audience. Suresh, what kind of stories would you be looking at in 2022 to focus on as, from your role as business editor? What stories do you of course talked about, the earth, the world being flat, but with not exactly flat. But what stories would you be focusing on?
A good question, Parula. To be honest, actually, if you ask me what stories do you think would be interesting from an economy business standpoint across all media, then I could say one thing to you. But if you ask me about the Hindu specifically, it's a slightly different thing, because the Hindu, unfortunately, post-pandemic, we reduced our, the paper size, we shrank it, and so the amount of page space that we have is very limited now, and competing with ads. And we're obviously happy if we get more ads, because that means our revenue is better for the print product. But in which case I get far less space for news stories. So, but coming back very broadly to answer what stories would be of interest going forward would be, I think there are a couple of thoughts which I just, again, one thought which came to me when Mukta was speaking was talking about how people are going to be doing COVID related sort of communications and stories and advertising and so on, is that the Lenovo series of ads which have recently been coming out, talking about we have your back and so on and so forth. That's essentially being driven, I think, if I'm not mistaken, by concerns about cybersecurity and so on. So I think going forward, because of the fact that everyone has moved online and, payments and transactions, a lot of financial transactions are now happening online, digitally, either on a laptop or on an app on your smartphone. The big concern going forward is going to be how safe and secure are all these transactions. How safe and secure is your laptop or your smartphone for conducting all kinds of, economic activities that we are conducting. We are right from restaurant ordering to food to, grocery shopping to whatever, everything is going on your smartphone these days. So obviously the big concern is what's happening in the space of cybersecurity and how secure are and then every now and then we read about how some large corporations, data was hacked into and has been dumped somewhere in the dark web. And so, whether it's your credit card number, whether it's a bunch of passwords, everything is now out there in the dark web. And yes, so cybersecurity is going to remain an abiding, if not significantly more serious concern going forward in 2022. And any good media outfit worth its salt is going to need to keep reporting on this carefully and well. Mukta again mentioned cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency has two sides to it. One is that, yes, the millennials are seeing it as a very interesting space, but there's also serious concerns that the central bank and governments have, and that's to do with the fact that it's not a fiat currency. It can never be a fiat currency in the near future. So what is it really? And if it's just a speculative trend, then how good or bad is it to allow people to indulge in that speculative trend? So that's again another area where the coverage has to be reasonably sensible and balanced and not just sort of. So, and coming to another related thing, thanks to climate change and this whole drive for green energy, we're suddenly seeing a huge, almost like a dot-com bubble. Just a few days ago, I saw a few stories about how a company based out of Madras had got some $4 billion of commitment of investment from an investment house in the US. This company, no one knows about it, but they apparently have developed some technology to process waste and make, gold or diamond out of it. I'm just giving gold and diamond as a sort of this thing. But anyway, to make money out of waste. And we don't know anything about the technology that they claim to have. But there's a lot of new EV makers whom you've never heard of saying that they are going to have investments in EV, in their EV, should I say, manufacturing facility. So a lot of money and talk is happening in spaces and industry segments where little is known about some of these entrepreneurs or some of the, the technology behind some of these entrepreneurs. So certainly some of these people are genuine people, startups, bootstrapping and trying to do some very interesting work, but there would be at least a handful, if not more, of people who are also just trying to cash in on a trend or cash in on the times and saying, I'm going to be doing EV or I'm going to be offering technology which will address, the charging issue for EVs and so on and so forth, and, trying to quickly get investment and money. So I think going forward, we need to help sift the wheat from the chaff and ensure that the stories that are done across the media are looking at who are genuine people doing genuine things in the space of green energy and so on, and who are probably people just trying to make a very fast buck. A lot of entrepreneurs of about, say, 15, 20 years ago, right from NEPC, Khemka to, we know a lot of industries, people who put up wind power and solar power and all kinds of stuff. A lot of them did it because there were tax breaks to be had and so on and so forth. Suzlon. So a lot of these companies are now seriously underwater. So whether it was bad management or whether it was, anyway, we don't need to go into that. But long and short of it is essentially we are, as things change and new technologies and new trends come in, you also need to ensure that you're constantly careful about what you're doing. And the media's job is to help ensure that the information that is purveyed is accurate. You do your fact checks and you ensure that you don't give someone who isn't deserving undue publicity, and you ensure that if there is a genuine startup doing genuinely good work, if you can give them a leg up, that should be a good story.
Thank you. So questions have started coming in. So I'm just going to, we just have another 5-6 minutes before we go into the next session. It's a question for the entire panel, but I'll split it up accordingly. Firstly, Mukhtar, a question for you is that what are your views on using data analytics to make business and content decisions? Is that a brand story that you're seeing? You're on mute.
Sorry, I just keep forgetting. Yeah, actually, but the thing with data analytics is, marketers are investing in MarTech stacks, etc. But, they don't have, one thing that we notice is that they don't really have the talent that can man those MarTech stacks. So the investments are in place, the data may or may not be coming in or whatever, but there are people who are not able to sort of, they don't know what to do with that data, right? So one way to solve this is through talent. The new age creative person, so to speak, needs to have some sort of data analytics sort of skill, like, at least a basic cursory knowledge of understanding data, because that is where you can glean your insights from and use that to make communication across multiple platforms. So that is something that I think that data analytics will play a part to do, but we're still lagging on that front. There are sectors and industries that are doing better on that front, say BFSI, auto, from the top of my head. But I think, categories like real estate, etc., really need to catch up on that front, because we are seriously lagging on when it comes to data and making business and content decisions. The money is there, the investments are there, but I personally don't think that we are using data correctly and to its full potential at the moment. So I don't know if that answers your question, but those are my views.
It's been a wonderful set of panel speakers, and I'll just sum up the three main takeaways. The world is flat, but how exactly is flat will be a big issue in 2022, an issue which will, believe it or not, impact whether you have cream cheese at home or not. Regional content is big. As Sara Ali Khan put it to Pooja Talwar, why should I just want to be on 90 screens when I can be on 180 plus countries? So that's the big trend, regional content. And we're going to hear more about India and Bharat in the session coming up. And, if you have sustainability baked into your revenue model, you're going to do far, far better in your communication and success. And a bit of a warning from Suresh that there's this whole green tech and clean tech sector. Do watch out for the fly-by-night operators. Don't take them on as clients. Thank you so much, all of you.
Thank you so much.
Next session.
Thank you so much. We'll discuss
Thank you for
games
having
another
us.
time.
Absolutely. Take care. Bye, all of you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Parul.
Such a
Thank you so much
pleasure.
for having me.
Bye. Thank